LEGO introduced the Porsche 911 RSR in 2016 as the very first member of the new Technic supercar lineup. 2 years later, in 2018, the bar was set higher with the Bugatti Chiron. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here is the brand new Lamborghini Sián. Is this the best supercar LEGO ever made? Let's find it out! The whole story starts with the box and the unboxing experience, and believe me, for this set this is really a unique one. I actually made a separate video about the unboxing. You can have a look at it by clicking on the link above. The size of the box is exactly the same as the Bugatti's box, but the interior layout is different. There are 6 numbered smaller boxes arranged in a cool pattern that replicates the rear of the Sián. Each box is numbered, but you cannot remove them one by one as you progress with your build for 2 reasons. First, the central ones have overlapping flaps, so you need to start with the smallest one, which is number 6, and you go all the way down to number 3. The second reason is the fact that the building instructions are under the boxes, so you really need to take everything out to get access to them. If you want to arrange all the bags from all the boxes, you will need a lot of space. As you see, I could not fit all of them on my table. There are 42 numbered bags, just like the ultimate answer. There are 3 additional unnumbered bags, the tires, the rims, and the 2 building instructions. In case if you were missing something, there's no sticker sheet. This set has exactly 0 stickers, which is quite an impressive change. The building instructions are very nice, they have a premium feeling. There are several pages of additional information at the beginning, and you can find QR codes for videos to watch about the car and the design process. Unfortunately, they are not working yet. Remember, the set will be only available on the 1st of June officially, but I'm sure they add a lot to the building experience, just like the podcast about the Chiron last time. At the end of the second book, you see the part list. There are a few brand new parts that I will show you during the building process, and lots of existing pieces in lime green. There are also some unique printed parts. Remember, no stickers. So here is what you can find in the number 1 bags. Let's start building. We start with the rear differential. I know some of you will be disappointed to see the old piece and not the newer one from the Top Gear rally car, but actually there's no need to use that one as this set is not remote controlled and the differential is not driven by a parallel gear. There are no big surprises in the rear axle for the first sight. The wheel hubs are the same as the ones that came in the Bugatti. There are 2 hard shock absorbers for each side. They will be definitely necessary considering the size and weight of the car. The suspension geometry was changed since the Chiron. This pushrod suspension is not only more authentic, but it will hopefully work better. After the rear axle, we start building the gearbox. It uses several dark bluish grey 11x15 frames as a housing. This makes the structure very rigid and will hopefully prevent any gear slipping or cracking. This is the first layer. For the first side, there is nothing really new here. Seems to be very similar to the Chiron's gearbox, just in a slightly different layout. After this, we continue building the sandwich with another frame added. The next step is something that I don't really like. As you see here, the orange pieces needs to be aligned properly, but meanwhile you need to push the small red axle all the way in the hole. This means if you make a mistake with the orientation and you want to start this over again, then you need to strain the other end of this assembly to get the whole section out, because you cannot simply pull out the axle. In this situation it's not a big deal, but the set has several steps just like this one, where you need to push the axles fully in without the ability to pull them out easily. I'm sure this will make the disassembly process of the set very challenging. I had to stop for a second at this step, as I did not know for the first sight how will I be able to put that blue gear in between the beams. It's a 1 stud wide space and there's no way my fingers would fit. Then I realized that it's not that difficult to do. If I hold the assembly this way, then the parts below and next to the gear will hold it in place and I can slide the axle in, which is, by the way, again disappears fully. So this is our finished gearbox and we attach it to the rear axle in the next step. As you see, this axle in the center will be the one connecting it with the front axle. With the next step, the two sections of the gearbox are connected. After this, we extend the chassis towards the front. It's interesting to see the new heavy-duty CV joint being used here, together with the older one. This interesting arrangement is the base of the shifting mechanism, which is again almost identical to the one that was used in the Bugatti Chiron. After adding a few things, we arrive at the end of Bag 1. Bag 2 starts with the V12 engine. It's not a very exciting part of the build to put this together. The engine is now connected with the usual push it to make it disappear axle. Now comes the front axle. It has double gears just like the rear one to make sure the forces are equally distributed and the gears won't skip under load. The whole setup is very similar to the rear axle, but apart from the steering there are a few minor differences. As you see here, these two white rods are added to limit the movement of the wishbones. This way the suspension travel will be limited compared to the rear axle. This is how our final assembly looks like. We have this strange section here with the rubber piece, not sure what will be the purpose of that. It also has two hard springs per side, and it is actually really hard to move. Now it's time to attach the front axle to the chassis. The instructions tell you to simply push it down, but in reality you need to slide it under some beams and then you can push it down in place. As you see, there is no central differential in the car. Oh look, another disappearing axle. I really hope I won't need to take this apart anytime soon. Here comes the steering rack that connects to the wheel hubs on both sides. With these knob gears we connect the shifter mechanism to the gearbox. A small but funny error in the instructions: the red axle was not positioned properly in the pinhole. At this stage the 8-speed sequential gearbox is already functional, although there are a lot of parts still missing, so the structural rigidity is not the best yet. It works okay, although it can be jammed if it is pushed too quickly, and I managed to find some positions where the second set of gears were not properly engaged. You can see that this knob gear does not turn when it is supposed to turn. We'll see how the whole system behaves once it will be fully assembled. Now we have the DNR selector in place. It is not labeled like in the Defender, so we will need to figure out ourselves how it works. After this we have some impressive piping to build on both sides of the engine. I have to admit it looks really cool, although I have no reference image to compare it to the original. The engine cover looks super impressive with all the printed carbon fiber tiles and the labels. I'm sure these tiles will be very popular among builders. The overall look of the engine is great, but it's a shame you won't see much of the pistons, so that makes the whole gearbox a little bit pointless. Again, a small error. As you see, there are only 4 black pins added to the sides of this assembly, but on the next page apparently there are supposed to be 2 on the front as well. In reality, the pins holding this new assembly are already added to the chassis. After covering the front section, we arrive at the end of Bag 2. Here are a few new pieces in lime green from Bag 3. This interesting contraption will be the part of the mechanism that moves the rear wing of the car. The next things to build are the seats. They look good with the mix of dark bluish grey and lime green with the printed headrests. It is pretty tricky to put this assembly in place. Several pins have to be connected and some of the beams are not very well supported, so it's quite hard to push everything in place. After doing the same on the other side, we have both seats in place. Adding some parts to the side of the car, this mechanism will be the one that moves the scissor doors. By the way, I saw again a lot of complaints about the high variety of colors used in the set despite being marked as 18+. Well, normally you would not see a 4 and 5 stud long half beam in the same color in another set. I'm sure they would have different colors to help finding the proper one. Most of the parts here are actually black, grey or lime green. You won't find many colors even in the hidden areas. This is the completed mechanism that will move the doors. It's quite funny, book 1 ends here and we still have a lot of parts remaining from Bag 3. I guess they had to split the books here to have an equal number of pages, so let's move now to book 2. The dashboard is again a nice printed piece. It does not have the Lamborghini branding, so you will be able to use it on other cars as well. The steering wheel is the usual one. There's a nice 1x1 round tile with the Lamborghini logo added. The steering works properly, but there's no hand-of-God steering, so it will probably be easier to turn the wheels themselves. This cross brace is ironically made of soft axles, so it won't add too much to the rigidity. I guess the distance and the orientation of the mounting points would not allow the usage of solid axles. After extending the rear of the car, there's a nice cage that houses the lever which will move the rear wing. You can see the completed mechanism here. It works well. I think it is much easier to use than the key of the Bugatti. Here comes the roof with some system parts added that will be slightly angled. After getting used to the disappearing axles, this is another level of weirdness. First you need to push the axle in totally, then you will need to use a black pin to push the axle in even further, and it is not a very obvious thing based on the instructions and not very easy to do. So this is how the car looks like at the end of Bag 3. Bag 4 comes with tons of line panels. We will start to build the body apparently. We begin with the exhaust pipes and the panels around them, an interesting mix of system and Technic pieces. The rear is built with some additional panels, and there's also a nice printed tile with the Lamborghini logo. Here's an example that proves again that LEGO actually listens to the complaints. The black 2-stud long axle usually appears only in non-Technic sets. The red one is used due to the strict color coding. Well, in this set there are several examples of the black one used, where the red would be very distracting. The assembly of the rear lights is actually the first piece where I was impressed. It is a mix of system and Technic parts with all sorts of weird angles and connections, and at the end it fits in place perfectly. I know there will be comments about the rear lights and the lack of transparent pieces, but I don't think it would add too much to the overall look, and they are not available in Transred for sure. We continue with the panels around the wheels on the side, and here comes the brand new wheel arch piece. It has the same width as the one from the Porsche and the Bugatti, but it has a curve on top and the mounting holes are also different. It looks great together with that black curved panel. Here we have the fins added with a pretty accurate shaping, although I'm sure some of you will miss the complex angles of the original one. The edge of the side skirt is a flex axle. This is also a debatable part choice, but I'm not sure how the small fins could be replicated there using Technic pieces and still being sturdy. By the way, this axle does not go all the way in, but once we add this nice rotor plate piece, the whole side skirt section will make sense. It's also a new piece. According to some speculations, this will be used in the upcoming Technic V22 Osprey set, and if it's true, then that set will be a real huge beast. Another printed piece here with the fuel cap, although I understand the added value of the printed parts and the lack of stickers, but I'm not sure if this special piece will be actually useful for any other builds. The rear wing starts with an interesting building technique. A big section of this flex axle is actually hidden inside the beams, and only a small central section is visible. It works really well. The rear wing has several interesting connections and angles. I like the complex shaping very much. The last item built from Bag 4 is the engine cover. It's again a mixture of system and Technic parts with some odd angles. The big panels fit very well, and there's a nice nod to Lamborghini with the colors of the Italian flag on the sides. The panel fits in place well, but there's no locking mechanism. I don't think it is a big problem, although you will need to pay attention to it if you turn the car upside down to observe the gearbox. And this is the end of Bag 4 with the rear section completed. Bag 5 starts with the front section. The connection there is interesting because it adds a slight angle to the panels. The assembly of the front lights begins with a trap, and I fell for it. As you see on the sub-assembly, the two pinholes are under the axle, but when you put it in place, it actually needs to be rotated with the pinholes above the axle. I did not realize it, so the section was built incorrectly. I corrected it only later. Apart from this, the whole light assembly is again something that really impressed me. For the first sight, it is a pile of random pieces connected at weird angles, but when you put the pieces in place, it will be a very sturdy and cool 3D representation of the Y-shaped front light of the real car. After adding a few details to the front, we add the hood, and it is covered by these cool new angled panels. Once the nose is completed, we move on to the doors. This is again a section with some clever angles. The doors look great once they are assembled. The mechanism of the door is really interesting. From one point of view it works well, the motion is really smooth, but that single 8-stud long axle that is only fixed on one end is really weird for me. It is fixed in place on one end, it won't fall out, it works smoothly, but I really miss some reinforcement on the other end as well. Here comes the front wheel arch with some panels and flex axles. The A-pillars are standard beams which might look too thick for the first sight, but they don't look bad in reality. If we take a closer look at the top connection, it seems to be stressed, but actually it is possible to adjust the lower attachment point so it is possible to make it right. Here are some flex axles to imitate the lower edge of the windshield, and the bodywork is pretty much finished. The brake caliper imitations are again printed. The structure is similar to the one we found on the Chiron. At this point I thought we only have the rims and the tires from back 6 left, but there are still quite a few parts here. The rims are, well, gold. Very gold. It's really not my favorite color, but I have to admit they look cool on the car. The size and the mounting points are again the same as the one on the Bugatti. And the mystery of the remaining pieces is also solved. There's a printed panel, which is like a small version of the Star Wars UCS plug. And there's an impractical bag. As you see, there's a huge hole at the bottom. So here's the finished car in its full glory. Total building time should be around 9 hours. I only have an estimation since the constant filming added a lot of extra time for me. I really like the look of the car. The model is instantly recognizable. The overall shape matches the original car. Unfortunately, there are a few details that are different. The most obvious one is probably the hood. On the original car there's a trapeze as a tribute to the Lamborghini Countach. On the LEGO version we only find the triangle. The whole hood is also narrower. The designers tried to replicate the original shapes, but there's an annoying gap between the new panel and the flex axle. The proportions of the different elements on the rear section might be also different, but considering the limitation of the bricks, I would say everything is there and it looks pretty good. If you compare the side view, I would say most of the shapes are well replicated with the available panels and other pieces, although the angles are obviously different. The nice continuous triangular window behind the door is unfortunately pretty crude on the LEGO version, and the continuous edge with the air intakes is also interrupted with a big gap here. So if you are critical, then of course there are a lot of differences to be found, but remember, it is LEGO Technic and not a scale model. Otherwise the whole car is very sturdy, it can be picked up easily. There are a few panels here and there that are not secured, but compared to the Bugatti it's definitely more difficult to accidentally knock something off. So here are the working functions. The door opens by pushing a lever behind the seats. The motion is smooth and it works well. The rear wing is operated by another lever in front of the passenger seat. The front wheels are connected to the steering wheel, but that is not easily accessible, so it makes more sense to turn the wheels themselves. The turning radius seems to be enough for a mid-size room, but I highly doubt this set will be played a lot on the floor. The hood opens and stays in position. Under the hood you can find a plate with the unique code that grants access to some special content, and a bag that is probably there because there was some empty space left. The interior has a nice color combination, although I have to say it looks less detailed and luxurious than the Chiron, but the difference might exist on the real cars as well. With the full weight of the car, the suspension still works properly. We have a longer suspension travel at the rear and barely any movement at the front, but the springs have enough force to push the car back to the original position. We'll still have to wait how it looks like after 6 months of sitting on the shelf, but it actually looks much more promising than the Chiron's suspension. Now let's have a look at the gearbox and the shifting mechanism. It is pretty much the same experience as on the Bugatti. There are 2 levers to shift between the 8 different gears, and we have a DNR selector in the middle. Since there's no central differential, if you drive one wheel, then you need to leave another one turning freely. If we remove the engine cover, we can have a look at the engine itself, but in reality the movement of the pistons is barely visible. We can only see probably the last pair of them, so let's see the gears. In the central neutral position the engine is not engaged, you can only see the gearbox working. If we switch to reverse, then the engine runs backwards at a constant speed, regardless the gear selected. If we switch to drive, then we have the 8 gears available. Unlike the Defender, it is not marked here which direction is shifting up and down, so we can assume that we are in the highest gear when the engine runs the slowest. The gears can be differentiated properly. The system was obviously not designed to be motorized, so I stopped the motor turning the wheels between the gear switches, and it was working okay. Here you can see the engine speed difference at a constant wheel speed. Shifting works most of the time, but it can get stuck if you try to do it too quickly. And here you can see the difference between the lowest and the highest gear. In the lowest gear there's a significant resistance. The car stops almost immediately due to the gearing. You can see how smoothly it goes in the highest gear compared to that. If we take a look at the gearbox from the bottom, the working mechanism is visible. I'm sure it has a wow factor for about 10 seconds, but beyond that it does not really add much to the experience. So let's sum it up. I think the car looks fantastic. This lime green was a great choice for a bold, flashy Lamborghini look. I know a lot of you expected the baby blue green of the Defender, but I'm totally sure it was the right color choice. On the other hand, unfortunately, the color inconsistency that we first saw with the 42054 class Sirion still remains unresolved. There are certain parts and panels that has a visibly different shade than the others. I guess they were either manufactured elsewhere or the material is different, but these smaller panels and the pin with the pinhole is visibly different compared to the other ones. It's a real shame, as I already see the endless flood of complaints. People want a single color for this amount of money, and it's somewhat understandable. I'm not sure if LEGO will be able to resolve this issue. We will have to wait and see. As I said, the overall look of the car is great. I think actually this is the best looking supercar LEGO ever produced. There are some inaccuracies if we compare it to the original, but nothing serious. One thing I really don't understand is the overemphasized glowing Y-shaped headlight in the teasers and the marketing videos. These are simple white rods, nothing glows here. I understand why LEGO did not want to add electronics to this set, but they already have white glow-in-the-dark rods made, so it wouldn't be a big challenge to make them in this size as well. So, is that price tag of $380 or euros is justified? Well, if you bought or wanted to buy the Chiron for $350 and you love that one, then probably it is. It looks better, it works smoother. It's an evolutionary step forward, but there's nothing revolutionary in it. My main issue is the definition of the target audience. As a Technic set, it's actually very expensive. It costs 20% more than the rough terrain crane, it has less parts and definitely less working functions. So if we want the most parts and functions possible for our money, then it's definitely not the best option. Additionally, the most complex function, which is the gearbox, has exactly zero playability. It's nice to see all the gears exposed at the bottom, but you can't do anything with it. On the other hand, if someone is looking for a very cool big display piece that can sit on the shelf, then it's probably not detailed enough for most, and it can scare a lot of people away just because it is a Technic set. And it has a huge amount of mechanical parts inside that probably won't be ever used. As a parts pack, it might be cool for Lime supercar builders and the Sirion fan club, but that's again not a huge crowd, I guess. So I think after 3 supercars, LEGO should decide if they want the next one to be a shelf queen, because then it will require much more system parts and less gears inside, or something cool and exciting from a technical perspective, because then I hope we will see something new. Regarding the Sián, I think you should definitely get it for the look if you like it, but maybe find something else if you want a playable Technic set with cool functions. If you like this video, then please give it a thumbs up. You can also subscribe and tap the notification bell if you want to see more Technic reviews and other LEGO RC videos. See you next time, bye bye!